Night falls differently for each of us, yet it carries the same quiet question. Who keeps watch while you try to rest? The hallway lights fade, the house exhales, the last dishes dry on the rack, and in that gentle dimness, your heart starts counting what it could not solve by daylight. You feel the weight of unfinished conversations and unopened emails, the ache of a room that used to echo with laughter, the small panic of a bill that does not wait for faith to grow. You notice how the body remembers what the mind tries to forget, the shoulders slightly raised, the breath too high in the chest, the jaw holding what the tongue did not dare to speak. Tonight we come exactly as we are, without costume, without slogans, and we place ourselves under the gaze of the silent guardian. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. There is a kind of loneliness that visits after the lights go out. Not the loneliness of an empty house, but the solitude of carrying too much inside a full one. You may lie down and feel the bed push back a little, and yet your soul does not settle. It scans the horizon of tomorrow and finds a storm that might not even exist. I see the parent who wonders how to guide a child who is suddenly distant. I see the spouse who longs for a softer voice to greet them at the door. I see the worker who counts coins and wonders whether dignity will be enough to keep the refrigerator humming. I see the believer who prays and feels nothing and wonders if this nothingness means failure. It does not. It means you are alive and you are in the middle of your story, and God has not left the workshop. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence. When night comes, the body often does what the soul cannot name. The nervous system, designed by a wise God, shifts into vigilance when it believes you are not safe enough to rest. And the amygdala, that guardian of survival, begins to highlight what could go wrong. Your thoughts accelerate to keep you ready. Your breath shortens to keep you alert. Your heart speaks in a faster rhythm to make sure you could run if you had to. None of this is sin or shame. It is biology trying to love you, sometimes in the wrong direction. The same God who knit you together also gave you simple doors back into peace, a slower exhale that invites the parasympathetic nerves to lower the noise, a hand placed over the heart to signal safety, a whispered prayer repeated with cadence so the mind can learn a gentler path. The body is not your enemy. It is an instrument that can be tuned for worship. In that space where science names survival and scripture names trust, Joseph stands. The gospel calls him a just man, steady and awake to God, a craftsman whose hands learned the grain of wood and the grain of grace. God spoke to him in dreams. He listened without arguing. He rose in the night because obedience is faster than fear. He did not make speeches about courage. He guarded the child and the mother with the quiet force of a man who knows where authority begins and where it bows. If your heart is tired of noise, come close to the man who loved the word made flesh in silence. Joseph's silence is an invitation to hear the heart of God. Think of your home the way a carpenter thinks of a plank. Good wood with a few knots, sturdy but in need of care. Some boards warp when humidity rises, just as we bend under pressure and say what we do not mean. Some edges splinter, like the old resentments that snag the fingers of anyone who tries to hold on. In Joseph's workshop, nothing is discarded. Everything is measured, aligned, and patiently made sound. The square does not accuse, it reveals what is true, so the plane can smooth it. The oil does not hide flaws, it protects what has been restored. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and every correction is mercy taking a practical shape. If you have been told that prayer is a performance, let that belief rest for a while. Prayer is an honest conversation and a childlike surrender, and at night it is also a guided release of what you cannot carry into sleep. The mind learns through repetition, and the soul opens through trust. So we will use both simple words, spoken slowly, and a gesture you can feel. There is a humble tradition in many Catholic homes, writing down the burdens that press on the chest, folding the paper like a small offering, and placing it beneath the image of sleeping St. Joseph, not as a charm, but as a sign that providence does not sleep. You work today, now let heaven take the night shift. Before anything dramatic is attempted, we begin by making the room agree with our intention. Lower the volume of the world, let a single light remain. Perhaps a candle if that is safe. Place a small cross where the eyes can rest. Allow the air to feel a touch cooler, so the body senses permission to slow. If your heart races, meet it with a longer exhale, 5 gentle counts out and 4 soft counts in, and let the prayer ride the breath. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. The point is not theatrics, the point is alignment. The way a carpenter aligns pieces before joining them, because misalignment multiplies effort and a true line saves strength. There is a truth we cannot avoid. Control will not save us. Control can organize the pantry. Control can pay the bill on time. Control can even suppress a tear. But control cannot create peace. It can only imitate it for a short while. Peace is not the prize of those who dominate every variable. Peace is the gift given to those who place their variables into a larger hand. This is not passivity. This is cooperation with grace. You will still make phone calls, set boundaries, apologize, try again, and take your medicine. You will simply do it from a heart that is not on fire with panic. Joseph teaches this posture: firm and meek, decisive and quiet, strong enough to act, and humble enough to wait. If you fear that your prayer is too small, remember that God has always loved to begin in small spaces. A crib, a workshop, a borrowed room, a hidden garden before dawn. Tonight, your room is enough, your chair is enough, your tired whisper is enough. What matters is not the eloquence of the words, but the honesty of the offering. Place before God what is raw, rather than what is polished. Place before Joseph what is fragile rather than what is finished. Let the repetition become a rhythm that teaches your heart what your mind struggles to believe. You are not alone. You are not forgotten, and you do not have to keep watch by yourself. There is a community around you, even if you cannot see it. A communion of believers who pray the same prayers across different time zones and ordinary kitchens, and there is the church who, at day's end, prays Compline and asks for a quiet night and a perfect end. Tonight, we join that river of trust and step into its current with the small courage of those who have decided to be held. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence, not because we understand every turn of the story, but because we know who holds the tools. Breathe, receive, repeat, and let the night become a sanctuary where your nervous system learns safety in God and your soul discovers again that the Father does not sleep. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Tonight's pain, when darkness reveals our battles. There is a moment after the house quiets when the mind begins to unspool the day, and small worries grow edges. The bill that looked manageable at noon now casts a longer shadow. The silence at the dinner table feels louder than any argument. A child's closed door speaks in a language of distance the heart cannot translate. In this dim light, the body remembers old fears, and the soul rehearses what might go wrong, as if vigilance could purchase safety with sheer effort. The shoulders lift a little higher, the jaw sets a little tighter, and sleep stands at the threshold like a gentle visitor who is not entirely sure it is welcome. Nothing in this is failure. It is the human condition perceiving risk after sundown, because the nervous system was built to protect, especially when the lights go low. There is a science to this ache that meets the soul without dismissing it. When the brain senses uncertainty, the amygdala tags certain thoughts as urgent, and the vigilance network recruits your breath, your heart rate, and your muscles into a plan that says, stay ready. It is not malice. It is the body promising to keep you alive. Yet there is another truth that lives alongside this biology. The heart grows weary of standing guard alone. Where the nervous system amplifies risk, grace invites a second appraisal. The longer exhale that softens the chest is not a trick. It is a door that lets the parasympathetic currents move through the body like a quiet river. The hand resting over the sternum is not superstition. It is a signal of safety that the vagus nerve understands. The whispered prayer that returns again and again is not redundancy. It is a rhythm that creates an inner room where the soul can sit down. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Many carry battles no one else sees, a professional smile in the afternoon, a private storm at midnight. The parent who traces budgets like fault lines and wonders whether providence and prudence can meet. The spouse who longs to be heard without having to defend every sentence. The adult child who loves faith but struggles to feel God beyond routine. The believer who prays and meets a quiet that seems indifferent. The night gathers these threads and holds them to the light so gently that truth can be named without blame. Naming does not accuse. Naming brings shape to the fog. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence, not by denying what hurts, but by bringing what hurts into a gaze that does not flinch. Joseph's story enters here like a craftsman stepping into a dim room with a lamp in his hand. The Gospel remembers him as a just man, which is another way of saying he kept a steady alignment with God, even when the measurements of life changed without warning. Dreams became directives. Night became the time of decision. He rose not because panic drove him, but because obedience had already trained his will to move when the word spoke. He did not have every explanation, yet he held the child and the mother within a circle of quiet courage that did not need to announce itself. This is not a romance of stoicism. It is the realism of someone who knows that fear can be loud and love can be firm without shouting. With this man as companion, the night becomes less like a corridor of what-ifs and more like a workshop where trust is shaped with patient strokes. Home under this gaze looks different. What seemed like disorder begins to reveal its patterns. A resentment shows itself as a splinter that keeps catching on ordinary touch. A habit of staying up too late begins to resemble a warped board that throws the whole shelf off balance. A harsh tone exposes itself as a dull blade that tears rather than cuts cleanly. In Joseph's hands, nothing is discarded in disgust. Everything is examined, measured, and brought back to the line that bears weight. The square is not a judge, it is a friend to the truth. The plane does not punish the wood, it releases the beauty hidden beneath roughness. The oil does not pretend the grain is different, it seals and protects what has been made sound. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and every small correction becomes a mercy that the body can feel. There is an interior geography in each of us, rooms where shame prefers darkness, hallways where anxiety paces, thresholds that hope is afraid to cross. The night, far from being an enemy, can turn into a sanctuary for honest mapping. The mind will bring up the same three themes again and again: money, relationships, health, or the same three names, or the same three memories that still carry an unfinished grief. When these patterns repeat, it is not a sign of spiritual immaturity. It is a clue. The nervous system repeats what feels unresolved until a new signal arrives. Grace can become that signal. A phrase spoken with calm cadence can become that signal. The certainty that a guardian stands beside the bed can become that signal. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. It helps to remember that God does not compete with our biology. God meets it. The creator who authored circadian rhythms and cortisol peaks also fashioned rest as an act of trust. The body seeks prediction to feel safe. Providence offers presence to make safety real. Between prediction and presence, there is a narrow bridge built from small, steady truths. You are not late for your own life. You are not a problem for God to solve. You are a person to be loved and led. This is not a call to resignation. It is a return to proportion. Problems remain, decisions wait, and action will have its hour. Yet even before the next email is written or the next boundary is set, dignity arrives and sits with you at the edge of the bed and refuses to leave. Under this light, the fear of being alone begins to lose its first sharpness. You notice that what felt like emptiness also contains room. You sense that what looked like absence also hides a quiet companionship. Perhaps the room holds a cross on the wall, or the memory of a blessing once spoken in this doorway, or the image of a carpenter whose eyes seem to understand both labor and rest. Joseph does not dramatize holiness, he normalizes it. He sanctifies the ordinary, the room where you fold laundry, the table where you count, the hallway where you pause before knocking. He knows the worth of small, faithful acts that no one applauds. He knows the courage of a love that simply stays. There is a sentence worth keeping close when the night begins to accuse. Control cannot purchase peace. Control can manage tasks and reduce variables, and such stewardship is good. Yet control cannot quiet the soul for long, because the soul was not made to be its own security system. Peace is not manufactured. It is received. That reception is not passive. It is an active consent of the will to be guarded by a love that does not fail, even when outcomes remain uncertain. Joseph's life embodies this consent, strong enough to choose, humble enough to yield, wise enough to keep watch without devouring the night with worry. If tears come, let them mean what they mean, not weakness, not evidence that faith has cracked, but the body's truthful way of processing what has been held too tightly. If no tears come, let the dry quiet mean what it means. The soul working silently, the way wood cures in a discreet corner of the shop until the grain is ready to bear a new finish. In either case, nothing here is wasted. The ache becomes instruction. The waiting becomes formation. The night becomes a teacher who does not raise its voice. Some discover that the same three concerns present themselves like a triad: a bill, a relationship, a health report. Others find that three names keep circling back, asking for gentleness or boundaries or a second chance. In this repetition, there is already a liturgy forming, the mind presenting its petitions with ritual fidelity, the heart learning the refrain that answers them. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence, and trust often begins as a decision taken before feelings catch up. The feelings will follow in their time. The decision can stand now, firm and quiet, like a guardian at the threshold. By the time the chapter closes, the night has not changed its nature, but something inside has shifted. The house still breathes, the moon still moves, yet the inner posture has softened. The nervous system has received a signal that it does not have to be alone on watch. The soul has allowed a companionship that does not demand explanations. A sentence has embedded itself like a gentle nail set flush with the surface, secure, unobtrusive, reliable. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. A little remembered truth: God speaks in our rest. The sleep of St. Joseph. There is a tender wisdom in the way night softens our edges, as if the soul finally had room to speak in its native tone. The day trains the mind toward performance and proof. The night invites a listening that is older than achievement. Scripture remembers a man who met God in that quiet, Joseph, a just man, visited by dreams that carried direction. The language of those dreams was not spectacle, but trust. Not fireworks, but a steady lamp in a carpenter's hand. In that hush, providence spoke without hurry, and obedience moved without drama. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Rest in the human body is not absence, it is active restoration. The brain's night shift clears metabolic clutter, consolidates memories, stitches learning into the fabric of identity, and lowers the inner alarms that kept guard through the day. The vagus nerve slows the pulse, the breath writes longer lines, and the immune system receives its orders for repair. None of this cancels the spiritual life. It reveals it. The God who made synapses and sleep cycles knows how to meet a person in the very processes that heal them. What science names consolidation, the soul experiences as integration, the kindness of being gathered back together after being scattered across deadlines and unfinished conversations. Within this integration, the old tradition of the sleep of St. Joseph finds its place. In many homes, a small image of Joseph at rest has kept watch over the years, a visible memory that the guardian of the Holy Family entrusted the night to God and still guarded with quiet strength. Petitions have been written and kept near that image, not as a transaction, but as a sign of relationship, a way of letting the heart say, "Work was my offering by day, trust is my offering by night." The gesture is simple, almost hidden, and perhaps that is the point. Providence often prefers the humble register of ordinary things, the desk cleared at day's end, the hallway light dimmed, the last glance at a cross on the wall. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and rest itself becomes a kind of labor in which God does the heavier lifting. Joseph's dreams were woven into decisions that protected a child and a mother, which is to say, they were woven into the concrete. He did not treat spiritual experience as a separate room. He let it pass through the same doorway as his tools and his travel plans. The holiness of his rest did not excuse him from action. It prepared him for it. The body understands this rhythm. Deep sleep lowers inflammation that frays patience. REM sleep rehearses emotional situations in a safer theater, allowing tomorrow's reactions to carry more wisdom and less reflex. Grace does not erase these mechanisms. Grace breathes through them so that a person rises, not only refreshed, but realigned. In this light, the stillness of Joseph becomes more than an aesthetic. Silence in his company is not emptiness. It is a chamber where words arrive already measured. He is fatherly without possession, strong without spectacle, decisive without urgency, and his rest reveals the source of such balance. A man who trusts the night to God can meet the day with a steadier heart. The soul, taking its cues from this example, recognizes that receiving is not laziness, and waiting is not neglect. Waiting, when it belongs to God, is charged with attention. Receiving, when it is faith, is full of consent. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence. There is also a gentler reading of our anxieties when seen from this vantage point. The alarms that surge at dusk were not designed to punish. They were designed to protect. They simply overstay their welcome. Joseph's presence becomes a recalibration. In his shadow, the alarms begin to understand they are not alone on duty. Sympathetic arousal that once rushed to the surface learns to settle as the nervous system encounters cues of safety woven into routine, memory, and prayer. The heart still beats. The breath still moves, but their cadence belongs to someone who is accompanied. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Imagine the night as a workshop cleared of noise, tools laid out with quiet competence, wood resting so its tensions can even out before the next cut. In such a place, haste would not improve anything. The plank that warps under pressure needs time, not scolding. The board that carries a knot requires a different angle, not contempt. Joseph's craft offers this mercy of proportion. The life that bends under stress does not require humiliation. It requires conditions in which truth and tenderness can do their work. What seems like delay becomes preparation. What seems like inactivity becomes fidelity in another key. The Church, wise mother, prays at day's end with words that have carried generations through the threshold of sleep. A quiet night, a perfect end. Those phrases do not promise a problem-free morning. They promise companionship in the dark. They are an admission that peace does not come from possessing answers, but from being held by someone truer than our questions. When those words mingle with the memory of Joseph resting under God's gaze, a certain authority enters the room, a paternal calm that does not need to dominate a single variable to be real. Some nights offer sweet ease, others offer only a truce. Either way, rest remains holy ground. The mind may still attempt to edit the past or pre-write the future. It is learning to stop. The body may still lift its shoulders. It is learning to lower them. The soul may still check the door. It is learning that the door is guarded. This learning does not rush. It moves at the speed of trust, and trust in this house wears a carpenter's clothes and answers to the name of Joseph. There are prayers that carry like lullabies and prayers that hold like beams. The name of Joseph has often done both, softening a heart that feels raw while strengthening a structure that feels uncertain. He does not replace the presence of Christ. He serves it. He does not outshine the mother. He protects her. He does not compete with a person's agency. He forms it, the way a square forms a true line, the way oil preserves what has been lovingly brought back to life. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and every night becomes a sanctuary where God speaks in the language of rest. The game changer: keep watch in silence, act with meek authority. There is a kind of strength that does not raise its voice, a presence that steadies a room simply by being rightly ordered. In many homes, the late hour becomes a stage where worry performs its longest monologue, yet another script exists, quieter, truer, where authority is exercised without domination and vigilance is practiced without fear. Joseph stands at the center of that stage, like a beam set deep into the foundation, not drawing attention to itself, yet carrying the weight with a calm that invites other structures to align. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Meekness in this light is not weakness. It is force under guidance. The nervous system recognizes such guidance before the mind does. Polyvagal theorists call it neuroception, the body's constant scanning for cues of safety. When the environment carries signals of steadiness, the breath settles, and the prefrontal cortex regains the wheel from the amygdala's urgency. A steady presence in the home functions like a lighthouse. It does not wrestle the sea, but it gives bearing strong enough for the vessel to choose a wiser path. Joseph embodies this bearing. He does not panic the household into obedience. He creates conditions in which trust becomes the natural response. Quiet vigilance lives in the simple choreography of evenings that know their center. Screens dim and conversations soften. Doorways remember blessings once spoken there. A small corner of the room holds a cross, a candle, an image that tells the truth about who protects whom. Nothing theatrical, nothing grand. The house learns the rhythm of being gently gathered, and the body learns to agree. Heart rate variability improves when predictability and meaning meet. Cortisol respects environments that stop asking the organism to sprint at midnight. In such a space, a person can notice the difference between urgent and important, between noise and need, between the tug of compulsion and the call of love. Authority of this kind is not a performance. It is a relationship. It is the tone that says yes without resentment and no without contempt. It is the posture that holds a boundary without humiliation, the way a carpenter guides a plank through the cut with firm hands and a clear line. Joseph's decisions in the gospel carry this clarity. He moves when it is time to move. He stays when it is time to stay. He does not brand his choices as heroic because love does not market itself. The result is a home in which fear receives fewer invitations to speak and hope takes up more air. Under such authority, conflicts begin to resemble materials that can be worked rather than enemies to be defeated. A sharp word shows up like a nick on the edge and meets a whetstone of honest apology. A recurring misunderstanding appears like a misaligned joint and meets the square of patient clarification. A habit that drains the family of attention reveals itself as a slow leak and meets the careful tightening that dignity allows. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and every repair becomes a liturgy of trust enacted in wood, breath, and time. There is room here for neuroscience and grace to agree again. Co-regulation, the nervous system's capacity to borrow calm from a steadier presence, does not cancel the spiritual life, it underlines it. In the presence of a person who carries peace, mirror neurons learn new rhythms, and the body's alarms grow less insistent. Prayer in such an atmosphere is not an escape. It is an immersion into a field of safety where love speaks more loudly than threat. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence and providence often walks into a room wearing the face of someone who has chosen gentleness with conviction. The night also reveals the difference between control and custody. Control squeezes, custody carries. Control imposes outcomes. Custody guards meanings. Joseph does not control the story of God. He holds the space where the story unfolds. He does not force the child to be safe. He lives in such a way that safety becomes the climate around the child. A home can learn this climate. Walls do not move, but atmospheres change. Fewer sharp edges in speech, more deliberate pauses between stimulus and response, a shared memory that promises the sun will rise, and that the family will still be a family when it does. Some discover that authority becomes most credible when it is transparent about its own limits. The sentence, "I do not know yet," can carry more peace than a dozen premature answers. The admission, "This hurt me," spoken without accusation, can open a hallway that anger had closed. The phrase, "I am here," has its own sacramental weight when spoken at the threshold of a child's room or at the foot of a bed where sleep has been late in coming. Such sentences have a way of calming the limbic system because truth heals faster than pretense. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Meek authority also remembers that holiness is domestic long before it is dramatic. The table becomes an altar for small reconciliations. The sink becomes a baptismal font for tired hands. The hallway becomes a procession route where patience escorts fatigue to its rest. None of this is sentimental. It is a decision to let the ordinary be sanctified by fidelity. The night honors such fidelity. It keeps its own record and returns dividends in the slow currency of resilience, subtler reactivity, softer re-entries after long days, laughter that rises more easily because fear has fewer claims on the throat. In this atmosphere, temptation loses some of its urgency. Distraction finds fewer open doors when the heart has already been welcomed home. Resentment has less oxygen when gratitude has been naming small mercies aloud, even if only in a whisper. Anxiety grows shy in the company of a presence that does not flinch. None of this denies the reality of danger or the seriousness of decisions. It simply refuses to surrender the night to forces that do not deserve it. The carpenter's image returns. Beams do not boast, yet they hold. Joints do not speak, yet they keep faith with every season. Oil does not shine for applause, yet it preserves what hands have loved. Joseph's meek authority is this invisible architecture. It is the goodness that endures behind drywall and beneath paint, the faithfulness that does not need to be seen to be essential. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and the prayer of meek authority is a house that sleeps more easily because love keeps watch. By the end of such a night, the home does not become perfect. It becomes possible. Problems remain in their places, yet they have lost the power to define the whole. The mind has learned a slower tempo. The body has received permission to rest. The soul has felt the company of a guardian who does not leave. The sentence rises again, familiar and newly convincing, like a refrain that finally found its key. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Night gathers the edges of the house and folds them in, and the room answers with a softer light, a slower breath, a gentler hush. A quiet settles that feels almost like a hand resting over the heart, not pressing, simply present. In that quiet, a simple prayer begins to find its shape, not a performance, not a negotiation, only the truth of a day handed over to a love that does not sleep. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. We speak as those who have lived a full human day, work done and undone, words spoken and withheld, fears named and fears still waiting for a name. We offer them without embroidery. Lord, receive what was beautiful and multiply it. Receive what was broken and heal it. Receive what was heavy and carry it in a way we cannot. The soul stands under a sky it cannot control, and yet senses that it is seen. The body follows, shoulders lowering, jaw unhooking, breath writing longer lines. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence. There is a tenderness to this surrender that does not erase responsibility, it reorders it. Tomorrow's calls will still be made, tomorrow's repairs still attempted, tomorrow's boundaries still honored. Tonight carries a different assignment. Rest becomes consent to be guarded by a Father who does not forget. The words move with a steady cadence that the nervous system understands. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, in you we place our trust. The mind tries to interrupt with details and deadlines, but the prayer has its own gravity, and the words return to their course with the patience of a river. A blessing moves through the home the way dawn moves through a field, quiet, unhurried, reaching corners without announcing itself. A gentle cross is traced upon a forehead. A doorway remembers its first welcome. If holy water once lived in this place, memory itself seems to carry its coolness, and a few invisible drops feel as real as rain. God the Father, hold this home. Jesus, Prince of Peace, dwell where we sleep. Holy Spirit, breathe where anxiety has been rehearsed. St. Joseph, lay your hand upon our home and keep our rest within your quiet strength. The heart begins to learn a refrain, and refrains are how trust becomes muscle. The heart repeats until the body believes what the soul already knows. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, our family is yours. These sentences fit the night like beams fit a roof, unseen from the street, essential inside. They do not argue with fear. They outlast it. They do not make noise. They make shelter. Silence arrives like a guest finally recognized, and the room gives it space. In that hush, the old prayer of the Church rises with a clarity that feels almost like cool air. Grant us, O Lord, a quiet night and a perfect end. The words do not promise a morning without challenges. They promise companionship that does not abandon in the dark. The soul hears itself say Amen and realizes that consent has been given, not to fate, but to faith. A last look around confirms what matters most, not the arrangement of objects, but the alignment of hearts. The family may be near or far, gathered in one place or scattered across cities, yet a single shelter seems to hold them all. Providence knows how to travel. Love knows how to keep watch. Joseph's gaze is the steady line through it all, a fatherly calm that protects without possession, that decides without drama, that waits without anxiety. In his company, even the ache becomes capable of rest. This is how the night closes without closing off. The mind begins to release its grip without abandoning care. The body receives sleep not as an escape, but as a sacrament of trust. The soul rests in a promise older than fear. The refrain returns one more time, not out of duty, but because love enjoys repeating itself when it is true. In the school of St. Joseph, we learn to trust in divine providence. St. Joseph, silent guardian, intercede for us. Before darkness deepens into the kind of quiet that only bedrooms know, one question rises that feels less like an interrogation and more like an invitation. What is ready to be placed under the sleep of St. Joseph tonight? Not everything at once, not everything forever, only what is ready now. The answer does not need to be eloquent. The answer only needs to be honest. With St. Joseph, every work becomes a prayer, and tonight, even resting becomes holy work.